went to this thing called Promise Keepers, and what it essentially was a convention for men that go to church, and they kind of just hear what manhood's about and all this kind of stuff. So when I went, though, I was only like 5 or 6. I was really little, and I went because my dad went with some of the guys from church. And so what they would typically do before a message or before a sermon, they'd come up and do worship, right? And so I remember most of the time I was at that conference, I was quite an ADD child, to be straight with you. So sitting in a chair wasn't actually my forte. So I remember asking my dad if I could get on his shoulders and kind of chill out for a little bit up there, because it's like a whole nother world. When on your dad's shoulders, you see everything going on. So I got on his shoulders, and so they started doing the worship time, right? And as I was looking out, on your dad's shoulders, my dad's like 6 foot, so he's not like a giant, but you can see quite a bit from that point of view. And noticed all the guys were like either like kind of swaying back and forth, or like they had their arms raised, or but I could just tell that they were interacting with the music. And then I noticed my dad started doing that. So at the time, being 5 or 6, I didn't know what was going on, but I just kind of did it because that's what everyone else is doing. And it really wasn't later till life that I really started wondering, what exactly is this? Like, what exactly is worship? I think when you throw that word out there, I think you kind of go 2 directions with it. Or really, actually, you kind of just go one direction with it. And then you just think about a band on a stage at a church playing music and singing, worship songs. I think when you throw that word out there, that's where your mind directly goes. But I think there's another way to look at it. And I think, just kind of when we were talking about the resurrection, we were talking about different facets you could look at the resurrection. I think it's the same thing with worship. But there are really kind of 2 things to know about worship and redefining what that means, really. I think one of them kind of comes out of Romans 12:1, and Paul says, "Therefore, brothers, I urge you to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice." And he says this is your spiritual act of worship. Okay, so what Paul seems to be saying, and I think one way we need to start looking at worship is that worship is not just a Sunday morning music time; it's actually the way you live your life. So the way you interact with friends, the way that you handle yourself, how you act in your family time, with your boyfriend, with your girlfriend, your whole life is really your worship. And so really worship isn't just defined as songs and dance or whatever, but it's actually defined as what your life portrays. So when Paul says, "I urge you therefore, brothers, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice," he's not literally saying throw yourself on an altar and stab yourself or something. Like that's not what Paul's saying. But what he is saying, he's saying let your whole life say what? Say that what the songs say, that how great is our God. My God is great. My life reflects the greatness of God. And that I love God and I love Jesus and I love the gospel. And so what Paul's saying, and one way to look at worship, is that to think of worship as not as something that you sing or that happens at a particular time on a Sunday service, but it's the way you live your life, that your life is worship. And here's the other thing I think is key, is that worship tends to be, if you read the Bible, a response to something that got done. So, you take a story like Moses crossing the Red Sea with the people he just set free. What happens right after that? They bust out in song and dance, and they start rejoicing, they start worshiping God for delivering them out of Egypt. You can even look at the story in Genesis. God creates Adam, and everything's going pretty fine, but God notices that, Adam's kind of lonely. So he creates woman. And so Adam gets his first look at woman, and what happens? Busts into a poem. He just says, "Oh, our God is great. Look at this woman." So what tends to happen is God does something, and then our response is worship out of that. And so the reason I say that, the reason that's key important, because it's kind of hard to worship if you haven't experienced God, are able to rejoice in what He has done. So to sing a song like "How Great Is Our God," or "Everlasting," or "From the Inside Out," God has changed me. It's kind of hard to sing the songs of those things that haven't happened. So what seems to be a key part of worshiping is to be able to rejoice in what God has already done. Um, so I think really two things to keep in mind about worship is that one, worship is not just an act, it's not just a band, it's not just a time, but it's your whole life. And it's your whole life being a response to what God has done, and that it's a reflection of what God has done. So if you've come to Christ and He has helped you through the hard times, that your life will be a reflection of the grace of Christ to help you out through those times. That your spiritual act of worship is a life dedicated to Christ and always reflecting Him.